Back with you on the news feed this afternoon. Let's turn to this now. Israel's Security Cabinet has sanctioned a ceasefire arrangement that will facilitate the exchange of a significant number of hostages held by Hamas for Palestinians incarcerated in Israeli prisons. The approval was granted following an unforeseen delay that raised concerns that last-minute disputes between Israel and Hamas could jeopardize the agreement. For more insight, we now unpack this with Ayesha Kajee, international relations expert. Ayesha, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this afternoon. The details of the ceasefire deal, what do you make of them, and what hangs in the balance here?
Well, the details are very much like the ceasefire deal that was proposed and rejected by Mr. Netanyahu about 8 months ago. As you've mentioned, there are some arrangements for hostage exchanges. I will call them exchanges because the people you have referred to in Israeli prisons, the Palestinians in Israeli prisons, are in essence hostages too, because they've not been convicted of any crimes. So they're actually hostages as well. There are some arrangements for the exchange of hostages on both sides. And there does seem to be some commitment to a ceasefire, including, as we've seen, up to the resignation of senior members of cabinet in Israel, and lots of opposition from certain members of Likud, of the Israeli parliament. This deal is welcome, but it's far, far too late. And one must not lose sight of the fact that even after the announcement of the ceasefire, the killings in both northern Gaza and in the Palestinian West Bank have continued. And this includes dozens of children. So, we must not lose sight of the lessons that this genocide has taught us. And we must not celebrate the ceasefire without mourning the loss of a great many things, both in terms of lives lost, but also in terms of a breakdown of the international order as we know it.
15 months or 460 days of war, finally a ceasefire. Others are questioning the timing of this, particularly on the eve of President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. Does it raise questions for you about the Biden administration?
Absolutely. The Biden administration continued to pay lip service to the fact that so many Palestinians were being slaughtered mercilessly, and yet continued to arm and fund Israel. So to have this happen at this point, when the Biden administration is on its way out, is contemptibly hypocritical, I would say. But I'm also really, really very concerned, as I've said, about what the past 15, 16 months have said and have done to the international rules-based order. It's caused a total breakdown of that order. It's caused, a total ignorance and silencing of what has since pre-biblical times been condemnation of the mass killing of women and children, the mass killing of journalists, the mass killing of healthcare workers. And we really, in our excitement and relief that there is finally some form of ceasefire happening, we should not lose sight of this. Because really, the international rules-based order has broken down. The countries of the West, particularly some of the Western European countries, the United Kingdom and the United States of America, have been shown up for the hypocrites that they are in terms of international law and their commitment or lack thereof to international law, to a universal rules-based order, to an order based on specific universal moral values. And that is something we really should not lose sight of.
Now, of course, Hamas has outlined the process by which Israeli hostages will be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners under the upcoming ceasefire agreement. According to its prisoners' media office, the release will be tied to the number of categories of hostages being exchanged and will take place throughout the first stage of the deal. Now, this is, of course, on paper. What is to say, I mean, in the process, maybe some of those indicated in the list, the Israeli government can say, well, they're just not there. And what happens? What is the implication of that?
The implication of the Israeli government, or indeed of Hamas reneging on elements of the ceasefire, would be fraught indeed, because it would mean a return to hostilities at the level that they have been at for the last 15 months. Not that there haven't been hostilities before that, and not that hostilities are not expected after that, but the level of killings that we've seen, if that were to continue, the implications both for Mr. Netanyahu's government domestically, as well as for the international system, the United Nations system, if I can refer specifically to that, would be gruesome indeed. It is already, as I've indicated, confidence in that international system has broken down. Respect or disrespect for the United Nations by Israel, to a lesser extent by the United States of America, has been shown. There are ICC warrants outstanding. I think we'd see more forthcoming should there be a reneging on this deal on either side, either by Israel or by Hamas. As to the numbers, well, there are still thousands of Palestinian hostages in Israeli prisons, many of whom have been reported to have been tortured quite badly, some who have been reported to have died, although in some cases the IDF, or the Prisons Authority in Israel, has not confirmed this. And so we may well see, when a list is preferred, we may well see that Israel will say, well, we don't know where so-and-so is. And what the implications of that might be could be quite scary. Not that, what we've seen over the last year and a half isn't scary in and of itself.
Yeah. Houthi rebels have indicated that they will counter any violation or military escalation during this ceasefire period. Is that a significant undertaking?
I think it's significant for international commerce, given that the Houthi rebels have shown their support for Palestine, whether one approves of that or not, have shown their support by attacks on ships in the Red Sea. And given that many of those ships are carrying essential energy, food, and other goods to various countries, the domino effect of that could be quite severe. I think that we should not underestimate the commitment of the Houthi support for Palestine.
What is required now? I mean, you've already mentioned it's a very fragile truce, if you like. It's not a cessation at this particular point. What is required here for this truce to hold?
International support, ongoing monitoring of what is going on in the West Bank as well as in Gaza, and of course, some commitment to rebuilding what has essentially become a scorched earth space of land in which, hundreds of thousands have been displaced, tens of thousands have been killed. There is no infrastructure left in Gaza. There is, let alone infrastructure in the form of communications or transport infrastructure. There are no buildings left, really. There are no hospital services, clinic services, education services, water reticulation, power reticulation. It is essentially a no man's land right now. And yet we have seen that the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine overall are committed to remaining in their homeland. And therefore, what needs to happen now is to have strong international support come to the table to rebuild what has been decimated in Gaza. Of course, much of what has been destroyed is irretrievably destroyed. Memories have been destroyed. Culture has been destroyed. Anything that has been a placeholder for the Palestinians' right to that land in Gaza has been destroyed. It's been a deliberate process, not only of the eradication of people and buildings and homes and infrastructure, but also a process of eradication of memory and culture. And that is a serious thing indeed. Added to that, of course, we're going to have to deal with loads of post-traumatic stress. And again, in that respect, we're going to need international support, international help, and a real, true commitment to rebuilding.
So the deal refers to a third phase of reconstruction, as you put it, and governance of Gaza, but it's still remaining mum, or at least no substance on the issue of a political future for Palestinians.
Absolutely. And this is because Israel does not want to see a political future for Palestinians. We've seen that. There is no positive, open-hearted, real commitment to a Palestinian future. Israel has demonstrated very clearly its commitment to genociding the Palestinians. And within the Palestinian camp as well, there is a great deal of suspicion. There is certainly suspicion of the old Palestinian Authority, which has for years, for decades, been viewed with suspicion that it is collaborating with the Israeli state. I think that suspicion has deepened into certainty in many respects, on many sides. And therefore, even those Palestinians who do not, or perhaps would not, have supported Hamas 2 years ago, may well be looking for a new political home. And again, that may not be Hamas, but certainly, as Mr. Blinken said, Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken said, that what has essentially happened is that support for Hamas has deepened. And whether or not you view Hamas as a terrorist entity, or whether, as I do, as a resistance against colonial occupation, in either event, that is not good news for Israel. It is not good news for the US, and it is not good news for Western collaborators in the Middle East, because what has happened has been to strengthen an entity that does have a commitment to an armed resistance, not a peaceful resistance.
Was Ayesha Kajee, international relations expert, there on that analysis. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Ayesha. Now, when we return, final look at your sporting news with Gwena. Stay with us.